Hi folks, in this video we're going to talk about the character of Buttercup. Now I see her character in some ways like the character of Inigo rather than the character of Wesley. Wesley is one-dimensional. He has a Kierkegaardian unconditional commitment and that just leads him through the entire film. Buttercup is more like Indigo. She has a character arc. In fact, I think her character arc is precisely Kierkegaardian, but Wesley really doesn't have a character arc in that sense. You see, the story of Buttercup is, I would say, the title of it should be How a Night of Resignation Becomes a Night of Faith. That's what I think her storyline is. So, of course, to be a night of resignation or a night of faith, you need a life-defining fundamental commitment. And so she and Wesley actually have the same relationship. It's their relationship that is an unconditional source of meaning for each of them. But the trouble is, he has a kind of blind confidence, Kierkegaardian night of faith to it. Whereas for her, the relationship, she doesn't have that kind of blind confidence. She always has a voice of reason in the back of her head, and that's partly what causes so much trouble for her. So she says, okay, even though they've got this love, her approach is, okay, I'm never going to see you again, or I fear I'm never going to see you again. He thinks, of course you'll see me again, but she's way too sensible in order to have such irrational blind confidence. So what happens then? Let's think about her reaction to the news of the death of Wesley. Then, since she has this rational attitude, she takes the news like any rational person would, that he must be dead. It would be more like Wesley to think if he learned that Buttercup was dead, he would think, impossible, she can't possibly be dead, or I can bring her back to life, or something like that. But that's not her approach. So we see that the relationship was still unconditional, though, because in many ways she goes into this process of deep grief. And Night of Resignation is in many ways like the process of going through grief. I think that's actually one of the best ways to understand what Kierkegaard is up to. So her incredibly deep grief, in many ways, you see deep grief like that, something inside of her dies when Wesley dies. That shows how much this relationship meant. And in order for it to be unconditional, it has to be identity defying. And that's why the death of the relationship, because of the death of Wesley, would mean something inside of her, some part of her dies too. That's how important it was. So when she shuts the door and goes through that process of grief, I see that really as what the Night of Resignation would do. And then you're sort of dead to the world. She says, I can never possibly love again. So the part of her life which was capable of love is gone with Wesley. That shows how Kierkegaardianly important it was. But that it could be gone is what would happen for a night of resignation. So Buttercup's emptiness consumes her. This is exactly the kind of deadness to the world that a person resigned might exactly have. Now, the scene that's really interesting is we see this again when Wesley comes back and she doesn't yet recognize him. So he also doesn't fully understand her motivations. I think key to understanding his dialogue and the way in which he's slightly cruel to her here is because he's been gone for 5 years. He doesn't know how she really feels about him, whether or not she did just jump into this relationship with her Prince Charming, as soon as she heard news of his death, or as soon as he left town even. So it's his lack of knowledge, I think, is really essential to understanding the way he's treating her. And her reaction, I think, really tells us a lot about his character. So he says, you're not capable of love, because if you were, you would have been blindly confident that I would have come back. So he's thinking about love from his night of faith perspective. Whereas she says, no, I did have love, but this is the night of resignation's perspective. See, she knows how deep this love was to her and how important it was to her. So when she says, like, you killed her love, and that is like killing her. That's why she is dead to the world. That's why she has a kind of imperviousness, a flatness to the exterior world because of it. That's the way she treats Humperdinck, but that's the way she treats everything. So when she says this line, like, nothing you can say can upset me, this is the kind of invulnerability that a person who has gone through Kierkegaardian grief, this is the shirt of tears that every person has to sew for themselves for Kierkegaard. That's what happens when you're in this state of resignation. Now, this is the part that I was talking about where he really prods her, like, how, did this really mean the same thing to you or not? That's what these questions are asking. And her response says, yes, this is why she's a Knight of Resignation, I think, because this line is exactly what Kierkegaard would say. I did die that day. That's what a Knight of Resignation would have to say if it really meant their life to them. But because this is a happy story, she gets it back. So she doesn't earn it back as an act of faith in the Kierkegaardian absurd way. She has to go through a process of trial in order to actually reach the Knight of Faith. She gets there in the end, but her character is interesting because it has this really complicated arc. Now, because it's not over yet, you might think, okay, the story is over. Now, you know, her character arc is over. Once she gets Wesley back, then this should sort of be like this. She should now have the same blind confidence that he has. If she were in the same had the same existential understanding of their relationship already at this point in the story, she would then have the same kind of blind confidence in their possibilities of success, or it would be the same kind of life and death attitude that she would have to it that Wesley has to it. So he says, like, I would always come for you. She says, okay, but I thought you were dead. He says, death cannot stop true love. She says that she gets it. Her next line is, I will never doubt again, as if now her character arc is complete. But that's absolutely not what happens. She's still on the road to becoming a Knight of Faith. She's not one yet, because look what happens. They enter the fire swamp next, and what does she keep saying? She, again, is the voice of reason. We'll never survive because no one has ever survived. She says when they're in the middle of it, facing these trials, we'll never succeed. She's ready to give up. Like, we may as well die here. She still lacks Wesley's comportment to reality. She is not the existential hero yet, even though he's already come back and she's had this second attempt at understanding the relationship. So really, her character arc is it's on the third attempt that she finally finds full existential fulfillment. Okay, we see the seeds of her possibility though, so it doesn't come out of thin air. We know she's capable of existential fulfillment because of the meaning of this dream. You see, this is one of those scenes where, you know, the prince is introducing her to the court, but this is the one where the old lady starts yelling, or harassing her, heckling her, like, you gave up true love, you're the queen of refuse and putrescence. This, remember, is Buttercup's dream. So this is like her own true self who is inculpating herself, who is criticizing herself. She sees she's not living up to her own standards, her own potential. She's not fulfilled her own existential potential because she hasn't achieved the same comportment to reality that Wesley has. The relationship hasn't meant the same thing for her that it has for him. This is her moment of transformation, and this is her third attempt, the one that finally does succeed. Because what happens after this, she wakes up, and now she is ready to actually fight back. This is her moment where she rises up and becomes a fighter, because she goes and confronts Humperdinck. Never yet in the film has she been willing to actually confront and take on Humperdinck. She's always been subservient or dodging his power plays, but she's never been fighting back against him. And here she declares her love. You see, this is unlike the scene after the fire swamp where she says, okay, if I go back with you, will you let Wesley go back to his ship? Because there she was still trying to deceive Humperdinck and manipulate him. But here she's actually willing to confront him and fight back. She declares her love for Wesley here, which is going to be that's a declaration of war from Humperdinck's perspective. And so she says, now look at this. I will be dead by morning if you make me go through with it. If you make me go through with the wedding, is what she's saying. So this is what Wesley would say. It's life or death. There is no in between. So that is now why I see her as becoming finally the Knight of Faith in her third attempt here, her third chance. And see, these things that she says about the relationship now, this is the Kierkegaardian fulfilling approach. Now that we're joined by these bonds of love, she has the same blind confidence that the necessary could be possible, that the eternal could be realized in the temporal world, that this finite world could have infinite significance, which is of course absurd to think, but that's what she's now willing to do. She's lost that voice of reason and has become the believer in the absurd. So she has finally become the Kierkegaardian Knight of Faith. Uh, and let me finally say, just like all the other characters who reach this point, she gains deep insight into the meaning of the events now. See, she now conceived Humperdinck for what he truly is. She has this moment where she says, then why do I, if he's the voice of reason. He says, like, no, Wesley's dead. He can't possibly avenge you. But she sees through the voice of reason now, and she says this insightful thing, like, why is there fear behind your eyes? Because he really does have fear in his eyes. Again, the logic of the film is confirming for us her perspective here, um, which is why this film, in my opinion, is completely Kierkegaardian, because all three of these main storylines, Indigo's, Wesley's, and Buttercup's, are all various versions of Kierkegaardian ultimate significance and fundamental fulfillment and authentic living. Okay, so you know the end of the story now. Wesley, now that she actually has become the existential equal of Wesley, they can succeed together and live happily ever after. Okay, thanks.